Well, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm a librarian at Detroit Public Library, and we've had a strong program with the League of Women Voters of Detroit for, my notes say, over 2 years now, but we started in 2020. We present on issues of concern to Michigan voters about 10 months of the year. You were brought into this program muted. Please put any questions into the chat, which should be enabled for you. Ruth Coolwin will capture these questions and ask them at the end of the presentation. And we might be able to allow people to unmute at the end to ask questions directly, if time allows. We are recording this presentation, and it will be made available on DPL's and the Detroit League's websites. Cheryl Bookoff will speak briefly about the League and the Detroit group.
Thank you. We are a nonprofit, the League of Women Voters in Detroit. Our nonprofit, nonpartisan political organization with national, state, and local components. For a century, we have worked to empower voters by informing citizens about local candidates, public policy, and advocacy programs. We encourage active participation in the political process. The League does not endorse or support candidates or political parties. We conduct candidate forums, register voters, hold informal meetings, and advocate for voters' rights. We work to engage Detroit, Hamtramck, and Highland Park citizens in local governance, decision-making, and issues of interest. Our membership is open to everyone, men and women, and those 16 and older. We seek diversity, equity, and inclusion in all of our endeavors. So join us. We'd be happy if you are not already a League member, and some are on. I know that are League members. We would be happy to join us and become a force for change for our community, yourself, and community and country. Remember, democracy is not a spectator sport. So with that, I turn that back to Jennifer. Thank you. And I will be putting in contact information if you are interested either in membership or have questions about the League. I will put that in chat later.
Eric Wellsby, who goes by he or him, serves as the Advocacy Director at Detroit Disability Power, where he oversees the organization's electoral and political programs. This includes planning and implementing DDP's Get Out the Vote program, election protection efforts, and accessible poll audit study. Eric co-authored the A to Z of Effective Inclusive Campaigns, an accessible campaign guide published by DDP in the summer of 2022. Eric has been working in elections and campaigns for over 20 years. He earned his bachelor's degree from Central Michigan University and has completed a certificate in disability inclusion and accessible design from the University of Michigan. In his free time, Eric volunteers with the Boy Scouts of America and Psi Access, an organization focused on disability inclusion in STEM fields. And I want to say again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and Ruth will ask them at the end of the program. Eric?
Thanks, Jennifer. And I'm joined today by my colleague, Kenya Flores, uses she, her pronouns. She is really our guru on all things poll audits, which is a great program we have that is really focused on making our polling sites accessible. Actually, not just in Michigan, but across the country. She's working with partners in a lot of states over the last couple of years. And so she's going to be joining me to talk and share her expertise and help answer questions we're sure you all will have throughout this presentation. So, welcome to Kenya as well. So anyway, just to hop right in, we want to spend a little bit of time presenting and talking a little bit about the background of some of the rights as they pertain to voters with disabilities, and then really talk about specifically here in Michigan, some of the supports that exist in law and through external means to get support if disabled voters run into challenges while voting. And so that's really what we're here to talk about today. And this is part of this week is National Disability Voting Rights Week, and I'd love to say that when we told Jennifer we could do this date, we actually realized that we were booking it for this week. It was actually just a really nice coincidence. So we've been doing several presentations already this week, trying to engage people on thinking about the disability vote, disabled voters, and how we can make sure that everybody can be a part of the voting process. So we're really grateful to be here, and we're happy for the coincidence that one of the dates Jennifer offered happened to be this week, and we just happened to pick it. So just to tell you a little bit about National Disability Voting Rights Week, it's actually primarily organized by the American Association of People with Disabilities, AAPD, and their Rev Up program. They're actually one of our funders. They help fund some of our election-related work, as well as supporting other work. They're a national organization that does great work in this space year-round across the country. And so we're really, really appreciative of them for being a major coordinator for a lot of the items we're going to talk about on a much broader scale. So it's every year in September. It's usually the second week. So that happens in the 9th through 13th this year. And our plan is to be, out talking about this stuff year round, but having a particular focus on it every year during this second week of September as part of this. So, if you know people that are interested that missed this and see the recording, we'll be out talking about this again next year. Detroit does have an election next year, so it'll be just as important next year as it is right now. And so, you can be a part of making sure that the word gets around about this work. For those that aren't familiar with Detroit Disability Power, where Kenya and I work, we're a Detroit-based organization. We have Detroit in the name. We're in the Core City neighborhood at Grand River and 15th in a building called the Love Building. We're about 6 years old, and really we're founded with the idea of leveraging and building the power, the political power and the organizing power of people with disabilities. Really making sure that their voices are heard and that they have someone here advocating for them. We work with a lot of partners. Many of those partners focus on services, providing real support to those who need it, versus we're focused much more on the policy and the structures, oftentimes in cooperation support with these partners, but a little bit different and with a little bit of different focus so that we can focus on and move forward some things that some of our partners can't because they're really busy just helping clients and making sure that people are getting the services they need. So, we encourage everybody to, check us out. We're around, we're active. Come by our beautiful new offices in the Love Building, along with our partners that are in that building, like the Detroit Justice Center, the Detroit Narrative Agency, and several others, Detroit Technology Project. It's really a cool building, and there's gonna be a lot of events going on out of there. So come on by and see us. So to lay just a little bit of groundwork before I toss it to Kenya, just some basic statistics about disabled voters. First, there in 2020, about 17.7 million people with disabilities voted. And this was actually an increase, about 6% increase from turnout in 2016. So, we see that disabled voters are a significant percentage of the population, about, whose numbers you use, anywhere from 20 to 30%, though, we think those numbers are a little conservative. But a significant percentage of the electorate as well at 17.7 million. And, there are roughly about 40 million eligible disabled voters. And if you count family members or other friends and loved ones that live in the household of somebody with a disability, there's actually about 65 million what we would call disability focused voters. So again, a huge percentage, and definitely an amount that can change the results of some of these close elections. And so this is part of why it's really important for us to make sure people with disabilities are encouraged to vote, that they are empowered to vote, and that voting processes and spaces are actually accessible to them. Because anytime somebody with a disability goes to vote and runs into a barrier, there's a chance that they might look at that barrier and say, you know what, this is just too much trouble. I'm going to go home. And that's one voice we're then not hearing. It's one voice that, should be heard, but really is being missed out on. And so we're trying to address that. Um, Now, despite our work and a lot of other partners to try to address a lot of the barriers that exist for voters with disabilities, we do see that about 1 in 7 disabled voters report challenges in voting, and this is actually more than double non-disabled voters. So we know for sure that having a disability makes it much more likely you're going to run into some challenge in voting, whether that be accessing the building, having an accessible way to vote, any of a number of things that we can certainly talk about, some of which we will. But knowing that just having that identity as someone with a disability means it's going to be harder for you to vote is problematic. When we say like everybody who can vote should be able to vote, but our systems clearly aren't supporting that. One final thing, in 2016, some national research showed that about 60% of polling locations across the country had at least one barrier to accessibility. Again, this could be, entranceways and sidewalks that weren't accessible to the process itself, having technology like the voter assist terminal set up and ready to go. And that's pretty bad. We've been doing our own audit surveys here in Detroit. We did them in 2022 and we're doing them this year. We did them both in February and in August. We'll be doing more in November. Looking at accessibility, we actually found that a little over 80% of Metro Detroit voting locations had one or more barrier to accessibility. And this is really, really concerning because we know that Detroit has, about 25 to 30% of its population have disabilities. And that means 25 to 30% of voters are potentially experiencing barriers when they go to vote in this city. And that's something we can work to address, and we're trying to work to address every day. So with that, I'll pass to Kenya, who's going to talk just a little bit about the legal side of this before we get into other aspects. So Kenya.
Yep, thank you, Eric. It's great to be with all of you. Thank you so much for being here. So as Eric said, I'm going to talk about the legal protections and we really are grateful that these are in place, but we also know that unfortunately it really comes down to execution and making sure that states and local governments are in compliance with these and ensuring that all eligible voters are able to cast their ballot. So a few of the statutes that specifically protect voters with disabilities are the Rehabilitation Act, the Help America Vote Act, the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, and the Voting Rights Act. And then we will dive into what specifically that means. And some of this is very, jargony. So I will try to, describe it in simpler terms. So first is the Rehabilitation Act. And this specifically is regarding any entity that receives financial assistance from discriminating against from voters with disabilities in any part of the voting process. The next piece of legislation is the Help America Vote Act of 2002. And this statute specifically established more regulations and sort of guidance on how to actually provide information to disabled voters, and also established the guidance that at least one voting assist terminal, which we call the VAT in Michigan, must be at each polling place, and then covers training for poll workers and any other type of election official, and stipulates that the entrance to the building and the path of travel needs to be accessible to disabled voters. The next statute is this is also the Help America Vote Act, and so this also is about the polling places and also websites. Okay, and then the next statute is the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act. And this one stipulates that under Title II, states need to provide an equal opportunity to any voter that would like to cast their ballot, whether that be in person or an absentee ballot. And then we have the Voting Rights Act, and so Section 211 of this prohibits any entity from establishing a literacy test, and this is specifically important in recognition of voters with cognitive disabilities, but protects individuals in that way. And then Section 208 allows a disabled who may be blind or have some other type of disability that prevents them from casting their ballot independently. And this protects their right to have assistance from anyone of their choosing, unless that person be part of their union or their employer. And then
Thanks,
I will,
Kenya.
I'll turn it back to Eric.
Yeah, thank you. And so like that's a lot, and can be overwhelming. And so really like this, the summary of the rights are that disabled voters, regardless of what their specific disability is, right, are entitled to vote privately and independently, and they're entitled to receive assistance from the person of their choosing. Like it's truly that simple. Like, you know, we talk about all the things about access and all of that, but at the end of the day, their experience and their ability to cast their vote should not be impeded in any way that anyone else's would. The process, their ability to cast it without, you know, election officials seeing how they voted, their ability to, if they do need support from somebody, to do so, right? That's it at its most basic level, right? And you know, even our the summaries that Kenya just went through, like, you know, those are pages and pages and pages of law, that, you know, you need a law degree to truly get into all the nitty gritty. But what we really need to know as a community and as people that care about this is, right, what are the basics? And really it is that people with disabilities should be able to vote, and they should be able to vote just like anyone else. And that might require some different, you know, systems and processes, but you know, the ultimate goal is ensuring that those votes can get cast. So what does that look like in Michigan? Right, one, in Michigan, right, we have a lot of different ways you can cast your vote. And this year, right, we have a brand new way to vote that we haven't had before. Other states have, but we just got our minimum of 9 days of early voting. Right, so we have the option, right, we can vote in person on election day. You can vote in person during the early voting period. You know, at your election day or early voting sites, right, they have the VAT, the voter assist terminal, which we'll talk more about later, right, that can assist. And these machines are really, really cool. And we actually just did a demonstration with the Bureau of Elections last night at our office. And we're going to do more of those in the future. Probably the election's coming very quickly, so probably not this year, but next year before the Detroit election, I know we'll be doing some more so people can have some hands-on experience with these cool machines. If you know, voting in person isn't practical or isn't of interest to people, right, we have the option for absentee ballots, right? And those can be requested. They mail them to, you know, your home or wherever you want them mailed. You fill them out. You can pop them back in the mail or drop them in a ballot drop box and vote that way. One of the cool things that a lot of people don't realize is that If you choose to vote absentee but have a disability that makes it so you can't fill out a paper ballot, there is a process to request um, a, a, a- an electronic absentee ballot that basically the voter can then complete electronically on one of their own devices with their own assistive technology, and then print out that ballot and then send it back, through the standard process and get that counted. So this is something that, again, doesn't get talked about a lot, but is really important for people with disabilities who may be, unable to leave their home and unable to fill out a paper absentee ballot when it shows up. Um, Beyond these two options, there's also the ability for curbside voting. In Detroit, some major efforts have been made by the clerk's office, even though it's not required to be offered at every location. The clerk's office has been working to make it available at as many locations as possible, particularly locations that the clerk knows have some accessibility barriers. And also there's some other options for assistance from the clerk's office. And so one of the key things is to communicate with your clerk if there are issues around voting. Because at the end of the day, like, they have a legal responsibility to help you successfully cast your ballot. But you got to communicate with them, and our recommendation is always communicate early. If you call on election day, like, that's a really, really busy day. It's hard. But if you know that there's challenges, or there's potential barriers, communicating with the clerk's office ahead of time can be really, really helpful for them helping you navigate what's needed in order for you to successfully cast your ballot. And so, that is just a basic recommendation. And it's one of those things, I hate it because it puts a lot of burden on the individual voter. But for right now, for the way our system is, it's the only real, like, solid solution we have to make sure the needs of individual voters are met. So what rights do voters with disabilities in Michigan specifically have? Individuals who have guardians are able to register and vote. And this is something we've been seeing coming up a lot lately. I've had several discussions where some people have been going around saying, if you're under a guardianship, like, you don't have that. Under Michigan law, even if you're under a guardianship, you have the ability to register and vote. And that should not be taken away simply because someone is under a guardianship. There are some states where that is the case. Michigan is not one of them. And I'm really proud to be in a state that recognizes that, the complex personal situations and medical situations people have should not be the factor in deciding whether or not they have a right to participate in democracy. This includes people in psychiatric hospitals. Psychiatric hospitals must help patients who want to register and vote, usually through their social worker. Can help them complete an absentee ballot application. Obviously, in most of those cases, they wouldn't be able to leave that location, so they need an absentee ballot. But again, so their social workers in those hospitals should be helping people to do that who want to do it. If a person with a disability uh, can't mark their ballot, you can choose someone to help you fill it out. And accessible absentee ballots allow you to mark the ballot from home using your own electronic device and assistive technology, right? So these are really just some basic things that a lot of people don't know about that are enshrined in law in Michigan as rights of voters. And depending who you are and what you have going on, some of them may apply to you, some of them may not. But being aware so that if we talk to people who might be in a situation different than us, that we can let them know that, no, like, you can have somebody help you complete your ballot, that you're under guardianship, you can still get your ballot or go and vote, and you shouldn't be restricted from that. These are really important things to communicate because these are significant numbers of people in our communities that we want to hear their voices. Their voices are really important that they be heard, and voting is a major way to do this. Some additional items. Every clerk's office, early voting site, and polling place must be accessible to people with disabilities. Now in Detroit, that gets complex sometimes because sometimes the clerk's offices, early voting sites are in old buildings, right? Old buildings built way before there was an ADA and requirements. And while efforts have been made to make a lot of these buildings more accessible, there are still barriers. But the burden really is on the clerk to make sure that there are ways for you to communicate with them and get what you need from those sites. Regardless of how old the building is and what barriers exist. And this again is the reason why we're seeing things like the city clerk working to make it more known about the ability to do curbside voting and stuff like that. We do have some sites that are very difficult to get in, particularly if you use a wheelchair or other mobility devices. And so having the ability to, vote from your vehicle or from outside is really, really helpful. Um, Early voting site, every early voting site and polling place should have at least one voting station that is set up to allow someone to vote in a seated position, whether that be someone who uses a wheelchair that, wants to roll up to that table, or someone that just, can't stand at one of those polling booths for the time it takes to vote. There should be at least one. We actually have some sites in Detroit where every single voting spot is seated. So, it is hit and miss based on which site you vote at specifically. But there should be at least one, if not more, spot where, you can sit down and vote if that's something that's helpful to you. Um, and all voters, including voters with disabilities, should have access to the VAT, the voter assist terminal. And that's something really important that people hear about the VAT, they hear about the accessible, seated voting booth, and they think those are things that are just there for people with disabilities. But the reality, these are there for everybody. Sometimes you've been working all day and you've been on your feet all day and you just need to sit down to vote using that, that seated space. The VAT is just a cool technology that does a lot of things that are helpful in making sure you cast your vote the way you want to. I encourage everybody, if there's not a long, long line to use it, to give it a try. If you go into early voting, there's no one there, you've never used the VAT, like give it a try, whether you have a disability or not. It like blows people's minds when they use it, because it's just a slick, easy device that can be used in several ways to meet your need. If you're assigned an early voting site or a polling place that is not accessible, you can call your clerk and ask for an assignment to a site that is accessible. And so if they say, oh, it's the church down at the corner, and you know that that church is not very accessible and it would be difficult for you to get into, you can communicate with the clerk and they will work with you to find an alternate location or an alternate way for you to successfully cast your ballot. And then finally, if you're unable to enter your early voting site or polling place, you can request curbside voting. Again, that's not fully enshrined in Michigan law in a standardized way, but because clerks need to meet the need if you can't get into the space, clerks do offer it. One of the big barriers we have in a lot of communities across Michigan is because it's not standardized. It's not always clear who to contact. Again, in Detroit, and some of you may have seen in August if you went and voted, that there were many sites that had like one of those billboard type things set up that said curbside voting, call this number. And you call and then they send people out from the site. And there's a whole process for that where they send out a Republican and a Democratic poll worker challenger and challengers, and they come out to make sure no hanky panky goes on, to make sure that everything is done above board. You're able to cast your vote. It's kept secret. They take it in, they scan it, and then they bring out confirmation that your ballot was successfully scanned. Right? There's a whole process for it that has to happen. Our big barrier right now is it's not standardized everywhere. I think Detroit's doing a better job than a lot of areas, but there's still room for improvement, and we're going to continue working with them to make those improvements. Kenya, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So as Eric said, every polling place is required to have a VAT, and anyone can use the VAT, and it is meant to be used by disabled voters, but anyone can use the VAT. And we encourage you to do so. So I'm actually a blind voter, and so I depend on the VAT to cast my ballot if I'm not voting absentee. And so the VAT has a touchscreen, but it also has a handheld controller that allows the voter to cycle through options. Each VAT has headphones, so that no one's listening to the voter listening to options or their selections. And typically those are supposed to have adjustable volume controls. And then the VAT also allows the voter to control the font and the contrast for anyone who may have visual disabilities, but still have some type of residual vision and just, needs to adjust it for whatever reason. And then they are compatible with sip and puff devices. And what's really critical with the VAT is that it is placed in a manner that guarantees the voter secrecy. A lot of times, they will be placed in a way that anyone could see the screen. Yes, privacy screens are important, but more than anything, it's really the placement of the VAT. And it should also already be set up and plugged in. I have had to wait a very long time because sometimes poll workers don't know how to operate the VAT. And so it's kind of like trial and error. And a voter shouldn't have to wait for someone to, set it up when they're going to vote. So the headphone should be there, the controller should be completely set up. All of that should be in place with the VAT.
And if I can hop in real quick,
Yeah.
Kenya, we've been working really closely with us and partners been working with the city clerk's office for the last couple election cycles, and there's been a lot of progress in the clerk really making sure that the training around setting up and having the VAT ready to go and having some checks and balances and some accountability on making sure that device is there and ready for voters. And we're not perfect, but we are seeing a lot less of the it's not set up, it's not ready to go. We continue to struggle with the positioning to ensure privacy. But again, it's progress because we're not having to go in and saying, where is the VAT? Why is it not set up? Which there was a time when that was the case. The clerk has been very intentional about that. So that's important to know. Also, the picture on screen, that is what the VAT machine in the city of Detroit looks like. When you go in, you will see that it's got the screen, there's the headphones, the controller, and then a printer. Because once you fill out your ballot, when you're done, it prints it out. That you get a physical paper that then you put in a secrecy sleeve, and it gets scanned by the same machine and goes in with all the other ballots. So it's no different. It's not like you vote on that machine and then it's electronically counted. It's still counted by the same tabulators as everybody else's. And in fact, that machine has no memory to say when you vote. And once it prints it out and it gets ready for the next voter, that data is gone. It only exists on that piece of paper that then gets tabulated. And if we have to do recounts or whatever, it gets recounted with all the other ballots. And so that's really important to know. So, Kenya.
Thank you. So next we're going to talk about the help that voters can ask for, whether they're voting during early voting or on election day. So they can ask for help getting to the voting booth, reading or marking a ballot, and using the voting equipment, whether that be the VAT or, needing the wheelchair height voting booth. But also, a lot of times we covered curbside voting a little bit, but if they're unable to get into the polling place for some reason, that would be another instance where they can ask, for poll workers to bring out their ballots. If a door is not functioning like it should, which is unfortunate, but we know it happens. So making sure that they can get in, whether it's a button activated door, or whether a door is too heavy and they might have difficulties opening it. Anything like that, a voter can request assistance with. So the next slide is regarding the rights of blind and low vision voters. And the main point here is really that, like any voter, a blind or low vision voter has the right to vote privately and independently. And so a blind or low vision voter may have someone go with them and cast their ballot, and by helping them read and mark their choices. Um, but they can also use the voter assist terminal, or they can request an accessible absentee ballot. That does still present some challenges, only in the sense that you're able to mark it using a screen reader, which reads all of the options to you, but you still have to print out the ballot and then sign it and get it in an envelope or drop it off at your local polling location. And so sometimes, because of transportation barriers, depending on where a voter may be located, or um, not access to someone who can drive them. For whatever reason, that might also present some challenges. But these are the three main ways that blind and low vision voters can cast their ballots.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
apologize. My computer that's presenting lost connection for a second. So the presentation is back. I do apologize for that.
Okay, do you want to spend a second on that slide?
I'm sorry, what was that, Kenya?
Do you need to spend a second on that slide?
No, oh yeah, I guess I can. Yeah, for those who might benefit for you to read it. So there is that slide, and I do apologize that I lost connection there.
No worries. And I can just reiterate that there are three main ways that voters can cast their ballot, whether that be with assistance in person, absentee, or using the VAT. Alrighty. Can you please flip to the deaf and hard of hearing?
Yep, we are there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So for voters who are deaf or hard of hearing, they can take someone with them that can help read and mark their choices. And the National Association of the Deaf has a voter information hotline that can help any voter seeking additional information. So for voters who are unable to read and write, the same accommodations apply, so they can take someone with them that can help read and mark their ballot for them in person. And then I will turn it back over to Eric.
Yeah, thanks, Kenya. So, one of the things is, we just laid out all kinds of, things that exist. But as I've said a couple of times, like these things aren't perfect. It's people out there, and people, are imperfect and make mistakes and all these things. So, it's important to be able though to, identify where you can get help and also where you can report where issues exist. And so, we have a couple different options here on screen. One is the state of Michigan in the Secretary of State's office, the Bureau of Elections, has an ombudsperson for accessible elections. Their whole job and focus is on addressing issues and barriers that come up around our election processes. Dave, who is in that role, was actually the one that came to our office yesterday and ran the VAT demonstration that we hosted. And so, you can always reach out, and the phone number and email are up here, 517-335-2730 and adavoting@michigan.gov. You can reach out to them if there's barriers, issues, whether it's to get assistance or to just report them, because that reporting is really important. There are, thousands and thousands of polling locations in the state of Michigan. And we have groups like us and others that are out looking at them. The Secretary of State's office actually pulls staff from all kinds of other departments to go out on election day and go to polling locations and make sure things are right. But all of us together still can't hit them all. And so having other eyes and ears out there listening and watching and letting us and our partners know where issues are is essential for us getting them addressed. So whether it's going through the Bureau of Elections ombudsperson, or one of our close partners is an organization called Disability Rights Michigan. And they're someone that, again, if you're having issues, they can assist, they can help. They do have lawyers who can help from a legal perspective as well as just helping in general. I think my connection just went down on the screen again. It'll be back in a second. I apologize. But Disability Rights Michigan is a great organization to contact. And then finally, the Election Protection Hotline, which is actually run by the, I always forget what they're called. It's the lawyers, the something lawyers, something or other. I apologize. I should put it in here. But really, it's lawyers who volunteer their time around election season to like take those calls and try to get things addressed. And their number is 866 RVOTE, OURVOTE. There, just came back, so let me reshare the presentation. So this is a really great way. And actually, you'll see us and partners will be out at polling locations on election day with signs that say the Election Protection Hotline and have the number. It's available in multiple languages to provide assistance to not just people whose primary language is English, but I think they have Spanish, Arabic, and I want to say there's a fourth language, but I'm blanking at the moment. But so we'll be out there if you run into problems on election day, long lines, broken machines or not set up VAT machines, or other issues or concerns, letting them know or letting the election protection people, there will be people at many polling locations around Detroit that will probably be identified with shirts or safety vests that say election protection that are purely there as volunteers to help voters and to help identify issues and get them addressed. Two other important resources
No,
are
I'm not now.
michiganvoting.org, which is a nonpartisan resource designed to provide everything you need to know about how to register, vote, get your absentee, all the things you can think of. It's actually several organizations we partner with run it, including Promote the Vote and others who have been essential in expanding our voting rights in the last several elections. They actually have a really nice print guide as well that we actually have in our office and can make available. But this is a great resource for just learning everything you can about what the rights are of voters in all kinds of situations and how to do the things you need to do to vote. The other is the Michigan Voter Information Center, michigan.gov/vote. And this is actually the state of Michigan's site for voting. And honestly, I think it's amazing. It was developed, probably 15, 20 years ago now, but it's only continued to improve. And one of the coolest things is you can go in and put your information and it will tell you your polling location. It'll tell you when the election is. It can tell you when your absentee ballot is available. If you get an absentee ballot, you can track it. It'll tell you, okay, the clerk put it in the mail, so it's on its way to you. And then when you put it in the mail back, when the clerk gets it, it'll say that when they received it and when they processed it. So you'll know that your ballot was received and ready to go. If you're planning to vote in person, you can go on there and pull up a sample ballot. So you can see everything that's going to be on your ballot. And even if you want to, you could pre-circle the names and bring that sheet with you when you go in to vote, so you make sure you're voting for the people that you want to vote for. So it's a wonderful resource that I can't speak highly enough about. I think Michigan's really fortunate that the last several Secretary of States have really committed to making that a tool to help Michigan voters. You'll also be able to find your clerk's information. So if you need to call your clerk about any things we've talked about, their information will be on there, so you can call them directly. It'll tell you where their office is, the hours it's open. So if you need to go in and talk to them, really just trying to make it easy. So these are two great resources that exist to help voters. There are others, but these are two of the top ones in my personal opinion. So with that, I want to leave a lot of time because I'm sure people have questions. But also here is my and Kenya's contact information. You can always reach out to us with questions or about issues that you come across in your voting, in your voting experience. And then honestly, you don't have to just reach out if you have a bad experience. You could also tell us if you have a good experience, because those are great to know too. So we can, it gets sad when we have to go to the clerk every time and only talk about bad things. And we can talk about like polling sites that are doing a really good job. That's great too, because the clerk then knows, perhaps who are the people that really get what they're supposed to be doing as poll workers, and she can perhaps have them help other poll workers to do better. So, certainly call if you need help, or certainly reach out if you need help, email us. But it can also be good stories too. So with that, we can pass to questions, and there's plenty of other things we can talk about, but we want to make sure if there's a lot of questions that there's time to get those addressed.
Hi there, can you all see me and hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to remind folks that you can put your questions in the chat. That is, and I will read those out for folks and make sure those questions get asked. As people are thinking about their questions or what they're still wondering about from your presentation, thank you so much. Maybe we can go over one question that came up for me, is regarding the VAT placement. I wonder if you could go over a little bit more like what to look for. What is a good VAT placement?
So by the guidance from the Bureau of Elections, there should be 8 to 10 feet of like open space around the VAT. And this is really important, right? Because if somebody is using a wheelchair, right, they need a clear pathway so they can get to whichever, the screen side of the VAT. And one of the things we see a lot is with great intentions, poll workers set that VAT up so that a wheelchair user can roll straight up to it. The problem with this is then that big screen, because that screen is probably about 15 inches, right? It's a pretty big screen. You can see it from a ways away if you have decent vision. And so you could look over their shoulder and see how they're voting. Well, if you can see how they're voting, they're not there. The secrecy is not there, right? Their secrecy in voting is not being protected. And so it's really important that, as much as the good intention of we want to make it easy that someone could just roll right up to it, it should actually be turned so it's not, the screen isn't facing the main room, right? That it's actually facing a place where preferably 0 people will be walking behind them and potentially see that, right? So it's just sometimes as simple as turning it 90 or 180 degrees, making sure that those pathways around it so that someone can come around it, vote in secret, get that printout, put it in their secrecy sleeve, and then come out and get into the line for the tabulator with all the other voters. And again, a lot of the barriers we come across, and in our poll audit work, that looks at a number of things, including the VAT setup and placement. Many of the things inside the polling location are done with really good intentions of, I want to make this easy for voters. The problem is easy doesn't always protect secrecy. And by law, that secrecy has to be protected, even if it means you've got to go a couple extra steps, or roll a couple extra feet to get around that table to vote. So that's really the thing to be looking for is would it be relatively easy for someone to see how someone was voting when they're using that? Particularly if you think about, because you can adjust like the font size, if it's someone that does need a larger font size, the bigger that font is, the further away you can read it from. And so, or if they have high contrast or other things that make it so they can see it, it also makes it easier for others to see it. So the preference is to have no one behind them that can see that screen. And so however that positioning works, and it gets weird because every polling site is different. Some are in big gymnasiums where it's very easy to put it facing a wall, on the one side of the gym where no one's walking. But in other places, you're in pretty small rooms, and to have the vat out like that actually takes up a lot of walking space, and it creates issues. And that's something that we have to work with the clerk in more detail to say, maybe that space actually isn't adequate. Maybe we need to find a different space for this precinct to be voting at. And that's an ongoing, process. So does that help her?
That helps a lot. That's some good information. So it would be appropriate, as a quick follow-up, it would be appropriate to ask people who are working the poll station that day, as opposed to like waiting and calling you or reporting that situation. It would be appropriate to ask someone who's working there that day to like turn it or move it.
Yeah, and it's appropriate for any voter to assert their rights. And since casting a secret vote independently is a right, you as a voter can say like that I don't feel that I can vote with and protect my secrecy while using this vat. I needs to be turned. And the poll workers should acknowledge that and fix it. However, they're people and they're having a long work day of 16 plus hours. People get tired, people get ornery. So some poll workers aren't as helpful about that as they should. But the reality is to be in compliance, and you have that right, and to ask for your rights to be protected is never wrong. And if you do get massive pushback and they won't, then it's really time to call us. And we will come in, and we won't be as friendly about it as you probably will be. Because if a voter's calling us saying, I ask and they won't do it, I'm coming in angry. And that's my job, is to come in angry and say no, you got to do this. There's no well, that's inconvenient. The voter has rights and they must be protected.
Great. And maybe another question is, so talking about, standardizing some of these things to help with clarity for folks, are there any bills or laws or things coming down the pipeline that we should be looking at, or is that still in progress too?
Yeah, so there is a package of bills, the Michigan Voter Rights Act, that are currently in the legislature. I believe they're in the Senate. I did go to Lansing several months ago and testify on some of them. In particular, provisions that would require and standardize curbside voting across the state. There's a lot of things in there. Some of them are disability focused, some of them are not. But we have recently had some, progress on some things. Like we did recently, get rid of the ban on paying for rides to the polls that had previously been banned. That was changed so that now candidates and the parties can't do that, but nonpartisan, good government orgs, churches, others can, pay for transportation to help voters get to the polls. Previously that was not allowed. And so that's a great way for people that don't have good access to transportation to be able to find ways. Our friends over at Warriors on Wheels are actually working on securing funding to make sure they have that they're able to provide some transportation on an on-demand case during the election. I'm not sure exactly where that's at. They have some funding. They want more because they can't actually right now cover every day of the 9 days of early voting and election day. So they're working on getting some more funding for that. But things like that are important advancements that have already happened. It's just a matter of figuring out how we're going to actually do them. But there are some other things like this Michigan Voter Rights Act, which a lot of it is just enshrining. It's things we actually already do in this state, but it's enshrining them so no one can try to take those rights away. And it is taking some things like the curbside voting that many clerks are doing in their own way and standardizing it to make it more consistent. So if you move from Detroit to, Grand Rapids or Flint or, the UP. It's not a different experience. That curbside voting will exist and it'll be at least somewhat similar to what you've experienced living here, to make it easier and less of a learning curve for voters. That's one of my big pushes and a lot of the work I'm doing is we need some of this stuff standardized because people do move. Not everybody stays in the same town or township or city, their entire life. And as a result, like even moving moving across states is a whole different thing. But moving within the state, the voting experience can be a little bit different, and that can be confusing for people that don't live and breathe elections. So what can we do to standardize it and make it that even if I move, I know I still have curbside voting, and I know that this is who I'm supposed to call. This is who I contact if I'm having VAT issues or other barrier issues. The more we can standardize that, the easier it makes it for not, and this is a big thing, when we make these things accessible for voters with disabilities, we actually eliminate barriers for everybody. And so it's a win for every single voter. And that's one of the reasons I love doing this work, because as much as I'm focusing on people with disabilities, it's good for everybody. Access is good. It makes it easier. And because any of us could have a long-term or short-term, access issue come up at any point in our life, where now we need the benefit of these things already being in place. And if they're already there for everybody, I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry that if, I slip and fall this winter and break my leg, that now I don't know if I can go to my polling location and vote. I don't know what to do. If we have a standardized system, I know what my options are, whether I can walk in there or I'm laid up in bed. I can get my absentee ballot. The more standardized it is, the better it is for everybody.
Yeah, we have a couple more questions in the chat now. This one is, if a person is not able to understand who they want to vote for or what they're doing by voting, should someone help them to register to vote or to vote?
My personal opinion is, is that like we should only be registering people who want to be registered. I mean, registration is relatively easy in this state. Because here in Michigan, like when you go and if you get a driver's license or a state ID, they straight up ask you. It's actually basically an opt out. And so we have a huge percentage of our population is registered. Like we shouldn't forcibly, if someone though says I don't want to be registered, we shouldn't. But that being said, if somebody wants it, they should be. And honestly, it's their right to not know. I mean, I would encourage everyone to know to do research and figure out who they want to vote for and what issues are important to them. But I also know people are busy. People have jobs. People have kids. People have family members that they're caregivers for. People have doctor's appointments and need to go grocery shop. Like, thinking about election stuff all day isn't practical. And so, like, part of democracy is that people can go and vote or not vote with as much or as little information as they want. And my approach is always, if somebody has at least a level of interest that they do want to be registered, why would I not register them? It's not up to me to decide what factors they should use in deciding whether or not they're actually going to vote and who or what issues they're going to vote for or against. That's their personal private right. If they want to talk to me about it, I'm more than open to that. But I have no right or obligation for them to explain that to me. If they come to me and say, "Can you help me register?" I'm going to help them register. And to me, it's that simple. Just because I think everyone should have the option, even if they choose to not exercise it. Because not exercising it is also like part of democracy.
Yeah. Thank you. And then another question, are the clerks trying to get those who have disabilities to be employed at the polling site?
I think there are some clerks around the state, and the important thing to understand is Michigan actually has more clerks than like any other state. We have a very decentralized election system, so there's about 1,500 clerks in the state of Michigan, which is a lot more than most other states. And there's some real advantage and disadvantage to that. So sometimes it's hard to say what the clerks as a collective group are doing. That being said, I am aware of some clerks that are doing, work, to make sure that, people of all kinds of identities, whether that be disability or race, religion, gender, trying to get a diverse population to work the polls that is representative of the population that votes at those polling locations. Because there's this really cool thing that if people go to the polls and see people that at least visually they identify as being like them, it makes them feel better about the process, better about the system, and more confident in being a part of the electoral system. So it behooves clerk, because I don't know a single clerk that's like, I wish less people would vote. Every clerk I talk to says, if they're not at 100% voting, and no clerk is, their question is, how do I get closer to that 100%? And so, they know that by, if you go in and no one at the polling location looks like you, that's intimidating. That can be scary. That might make you less likely to vote. Clerks don't want that. So, there's varying level of how much they're focusing on certain things, including disability in that targeting. But, they are open to that, diversity in who works there. And again, I've never encountered a clerk that was like, it is, if you're willing to put in the time for the very little pay we pay poll workers, and you're capable of doing the job, like they're short on poll. I don't know a single clerk that isn't scrambling to get enough poll workers. And so they need more. And so, making sure, but part of it is they need people that are committed, qualified, available, and willing to put in, a pretty long day. Plus, you have to do the training. You can't just show up on election day. You have to do the training so legally what you can and can't do as a poll worker, and also what voters' rights are and all of that. It's a big job. It is a huge job, and I get that like people aren't beating down the door to do it because it doesn't have a lot of glamour. It doesn't have a lot of glory, but it's an essential part of our democracy. So, if it's something you think you're potentially interested in, I'd encourage you to reach out to your clerk, and see if they're still looking. The Detroit clerk is still looking. I know that for sure. Basically, every clerk I talk to is still looking. And one of the things they particularly need is they do need some bipartisan participation. They can't, they need to make sure that it's not just all Democrats or all Republicans that are working, as those poll workers. Just as part of like good government, right? And everybody keeping everyone in check, that no one does anything they shouldn't be doing. And in a city like Detroit, where Detroit is a predominantly Democratic voting city, predominantly the poll workers identify as Democrats. And so I know there's always a challenge in getting enough Republicans volunteered to help, again, make sure that we're all keeping an eye on each other so that no one can come from outside and say, we didn't do our election right. If both parties are in the room, keeping an eye on each other, I guarantee they're not letting the other side get away with anything. Right. And that's part of how the system is designed on purpose to make sure questionable things don't happen. And Michigan, I have a lot of confidence in the integrity of Michigan elections. I think our system is really set up in a way that makes it very hard to do questionable things. Other states, I don't think have a lot of the protections we have. But we are, I think, in a better spot than many states. I'm not saying it's flawless, that it's perfect, but I think it is hard. Like, you got to put in some energy if you want to do things wrong in Michigan. And I like that. It makes it more work for me day in, day out, but that work is worth it because we can have faith in our elections.
Yeah. And another from Cheryl: how can we in the league and the library provide more effective support? What are you doing in assuring voter access by the disabled?
So the one thing I think particularly, the league and the library have huge reach, and making sure that we're getting just the basic facts in front of people, and whether that's by having information up in the libraries and in the league. I mean, the league does so much to help inform voters. I'm so appreciative of them, and I've been working actually with different chapters of the league across the state. Since I first got into politics over 20 years ago, the league was right there. So I always love when I get to interact with them. But making sure that the information is out there and available. That it's when people are walking into the library, they're seeing reminders that voting's coming up, that they need to get their absentee ballots, things like that, all done in a nonpartisan way. We have these print copies of the MichiganVoting.org. If the library wants some copies of those to have on their like free giveaway desk, like tell me, you're right down from our office. I will drive them there personally and drop them off. Right? We have these things, and if they sit in a box in our office through November 5th, they did no good. They got to be in voters' hands, so voters are equipped to know their options, know their rights. Because again, we can't be everywhere. Voters are everywhere, and the more voters that know these things, the more they can help be our eyes and ears. They can call, say, hey, I have a right to this. And if those rights are being violated and no one will address it, they can call in backup by calling us or calling the ombudsperson or calling Disability Rights Michigan or calling the voter assistance hotline. And we'll come in and back you up. That's what our job is. So, and I think the library can be part of that. The league is one of the leaders, I think, in doing that type of education work. So, part of us keep doing what you're doing, but if there's ways we can provide things that are helpful, and that's part of the reason why you ask us to come and do this, we're going to do it. If having a copy of the slideshow available that you can use, the slides for other things, or when you're talking to library goers about other things, or putting it up if you have monitors, scrolling monitors in your spaces, like we'll send it to you. Whatever we can do to get this in front of more voters' eyes and more Detroiters' eyes is the goal, because it's the only way we're going to get further proliferation of this knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah, and I see an emphatic yes from Jennifer. She would like these flyers. So I don't have any other questions, Jennifer. I don't know if you want to open up folks if they want to raise their hands, or if you want to close out the program.
You certainly can if people want to ask something directly.
Yep, it looks like Mary Jo has
All right.
a question.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes,
So, I think I know the answer to this, but years ago, I was a poll watcher, and while the two precinct captains left, I asked one of the poll workers how the VAT machine worked, and I was told, well, they require a key, and both precinct captains were gone at the same time with the keys. But I don't think they need a key anymore, right?
It's not a key, it's like a card.
Okay.
And each card is like individualized. There's some pretty cool security measures. We talked about a little bit during our program last night. So there is because you can't just walk up to the machine and start voting. A poll worker basically comes in, puts this little card in, they put in a code, and then they actually set it up based on the voter's needs. They're looking at some ways to change that where the voter can do more of that without assistance. But if you need to be touch screen versus you want to use the controller, those type of things they preset up, and then they hit go, and then they walk away and you've got your ballot. So there is some steps to it, but they are looking at ways to make that even smoother and involve the poll workers in it even less, because again, it's about giving that voter the independence to go and vote and feel confident that the poll workers aren't seeing how they're voting and things like that. But yeah, so there are some steps. It's not like a physical key. It's like everything else now. It's a card with a little chip in it that they use to basically keep it. It creates a unique identifier each time it's used, so that someone couldn't just keep putting in the same one over and over again and vote 1,000 times. So some pretty cool security measures that I'm not a tech guy. I don't know how it works. I just am told by tech people I trust that it works.
Okay, so each voter would get their own. And then I just wanted to give a compliment to the organization. A few years ago, I heard Dessa speak about the audit. And so and she said, you know, how they were going and speaking to clerks. And so I was at an election commission meeting in Dearborn not too long after that, and asked the assistant clerk about it. And she said, yes, they did come, and they did buy the special voting places where you could sit. So there's one of those apparently in each precinct. And I think we've got maybe 40 precincts. So I thought that was pretty good.
That's fantastic to hear. Yeah. And we've been out doing audits this year. We did some in February, some in August, and we'll do some in November. So far, we did 179 sites on election day in August. We did 41 early voting sites in August, and we did 40 early voting sites in February. We're still determining how many we're going to do in November. But once we get through November, we're going to compile all of that into a report like we did in 2022. And then we will share that report publicly. We will break out the data for each municipality that we visited and provide that to the clerks and other election officials in that area. And then us and our partners we have whole clerk engagement teams that we're regularly talking to these clerks, meeting with them, to not just say like, here are the problems, but to help them identify solutions. And this includes myself, the ombudsperson from the Bureau of Election, Disability Rights Michigan, and Disability Network Michigan have spoken at 3 different events and conferences hosted by the Michigan Association of Municipal Clerks. So we're not just engaging the clerks in this area that we're auditing, we're actually engaging clerks across the state, so that we can help all of them, so that this is a solution statewide. And so we're trying to involve them along with the Bureau of Elections at the state level, the county clerks, so we can work together to come up with standardized solutions that will address this as broadly as possible. It's slow going, because like I said, there's 1,500 clerks. But you know, we've spoken to hundreds of them, and we've gotten some really, really great responses. We do have some clerks that are a little reluctant. They have some differing views on what needs to be done, and that's okay. Like, we'll continue to work with them and hopefully move them towards what we see the vision as. But there are so many clerks that are really appreciative because they don't have the time or the capacity to look at the level we do. And so to have someone who's saying like, look, we know that this report, if you didn't do good, makes you look bad today, but we're here to help. And when we come back in and your numbers are better, we're going to advertise those too. We're not trying to make you look bad. In fact, we're here to try to make you look better. And as you improve, we will report that the same way we did the numbers the first year, so that people will know this clerk is making an effort. This clerk is doing better. We want to be part of the solution, not an enemy, not a outside agitator. Like, we're doing this because we believe it's important. And we want to be partners with clerks. So I'm so glad to hear that you had that good experience.
All right, if Cheryl? I've unmuted you, I think.
Oh, thank you. I did, yes. Okay. Any rate, it struck me when you first started and talked about this being Disability Month, I believe. I'm not sure how it was termed, but that it's something everybody on this webinar forum can do. And that certainly is for the league. I will be very happy to help push that forward. And I'm not sure if Jennifer can at the library, because they have so many more constituents in many ways. But we can take that week and publicize it. So whether one does it through a church, through schools, but it seems to me one of the issues always would be getting out to people the information. And I know it's all of us are struggling with that, but I think that we can help each other, and we certainly can get out information through the league to both the leagues and your information that could help them, as well as highlighting it in our newsletter that week and doing it maybe early enough so it's not going to encumber you with 50 million requests to speak or something, but and maybe you're willing to do that. But anyway, so I challenge all of us to kind of incorporate this once a year at the very least, in doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and our plan is, you know, I mean, first, thanks, Cheryl, and, you know, partnerships are essential in this work. You know, we're a staff of 9 people, right, trying to do this for basically the entire state of Michigan. I mean, and that's not possible without partnerships and friends. And some of those partnerships are with other orgs that are disability focused, but many of them are with just other organizations that do, you know, nonprofit 501c3 compliant electoral campaigns to inform and get out the vote. And they call us and say, hey, we're doing this. What do we need to know from the disability perspective? Right. And so we do that. Yeah, Disability Voting Rights Week is every year. We're gonna, you know, I think gear up doing more aggressive programming. I will tell you, this is my 3rd presentation in 2 days. Because this week is in high demand, but you know, getting information early out to partners so that they can include it in, you know, both our events, but also just the information in their newsletters. But as much as, you know, there is this week to bring focus to it, like for us, every week is Disability Voting Rights Week. Like that, my entire job exists to inform and get disabled voters that what they need so that they can participate in democracy, whether that be voting or voicing their opinion at a city council meeting, or, you know, whatever it is they need to do to be a part of democracy. That's my job 365 days a year. So anyone can call me at any time, and it's the work I'm doing if they want to be a part of it, whether it's Disability Voting Rights Week or not. Like that's what I'm here for. And I'll do the best I can with the capacity I have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any more questions or comments? Well, I did have the emphatic yes reply. I can certainly distribute your literature within the library system, and I can probably announce it in the broader library community in the state, and put them in touch with you if they're interested.
Yeah, yeah, and because
more
we
of
have
the information.
from our partners, we have some posters that just run through like, here's how to register to vote, here's how to get your absentee ballot. They're all 501c3 compliant, along with then this booklet that I'll certainly bring you some that just goes through everything.
Good.
Like everything, whatever your question is, it's probably in there.
Mhm.
There's a couple places I'd like us to have a little bit more information, but everything is at least touched
start.
on.
It's a
But we'll
start.
expand it for 2025 and 2026. We'll get more information in. I think it's
Okay.
like 40 or 50 pages. It's a lot, but whatever question voters have, like it's in there. So we can definitely, I'll arrange with you to bring you some stuff next week.
Okay, that would be fine. This recording will be available on the library's YouTube site, probably in a couple of weeks. So here is the link. And
on the league site too.
and it will be on the league site too.
Sorry.
They check it to make sure when it's available and they link to it.
And when it's available, we'll probably push it out on our social media too.
That's great.
So
that's great. And we could talk about try to do this again next year if you're not going
absolutely.
to be busy in Disability Voting Rights Week.
Absolutely.
And our next program will be October 8th, and I don't have a link for it yet, but it will be, I'm sorry, I have
The
too many windows
environmental
open here.
issues.
Yes, the Michigan Environmental Council will be talking about issues that we should be aware of there. And a bit of persiflage, let's see. Today, both the League and NPR's Planet Money team have bingo cards for the debate tonight.
No. We
So-
do.
I've got the link here, and I thought I had the league link too. All right, that is supposed to be a link. But if anyone is interested in that.
Well,
For those
thank
of us-
everybody for attending, given the
Yes.
presidential
Debate
discussion
tonight,
tonight,
yes.
debate that we have. So you put a
Yes, thank
priority
you.
in a good
Yes.
way. Thank you.
Thank you for everyone for coming, and thank you, Eric and Kenya. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about more networking.
Ruth has a question.
Okay.
Oh, nope, just a clap. Thank you. Thank you.
All right then. Thank you. I will try
Thank
to
you.
I will try to let you know when it is available, but it usually takes a couple of weeks before the recording gets up.
Okay, sounds good. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Mhm,
Thank
thank
you. Take
Really
care.
appreciate it. Good night.
Good night.